Yeah, like I know, I get it. But like the thing is, I keep losing.
I keep losing money even though I'm studying. This is a common problem with all day traders. It's something that everybody has to go through. It's one of the growing pains of being a day trader. Now, let's get this out of the way right from the start. Comment, like, subscribe. Good, done, move on. So the problem is that a lot of people, they don't know how to train properly. So you're studying, you're doing all of your due diligence to make yourself a better day trader, but you're hitting these snags. Again, this is a very common growing pain for all day traders. It's something we all gone through, have been through, or will go through at one point in our day trading career. So this boils down to, first off, identifying where you are on your path. If you are very new to day trading and you have only been studying for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I would even consider 2 to 3 months still pretty new to day trading. I would say that you simply haven't put enough time into studying and mastering your craft yet. So first off, that's where you have to draw a line. How long have you been studying and exactly what are you expecting out of that? So having a proper expectation there really helps kind of guide you where you're supposed to go in terms of how long should it take. Now, when we think about how long should it take, I would say that everybody's different. This isn't like university where they kind of force you on a path and everybody has to fit in that mold. For example, in university, you go and you want to become profession X, you can take up to 4, and maybe if you're really smart, you can take 5 classes per semester. That's the standard, 4 classes. So you have to fit into this mold of taking 4 classes. What if that's too much for you? What if you can only handle 2 or 3 classes? Well, then you'd have to take it slower and you'd have to go longer. Well, this is the same thing with day trading. If you can't handle studying that much, and some people can't, it's not a problem. Some people learn better when they learn slower. And if you're one of those people, again, it's not a problem. You just have to be able to tailor that and understand that if somebody else made it in 6 months or 2 years or 3 years, it might take you a little longer. The alternative as well, in university, you can only take 4 classes per semester, maybe 5. Again, with day trading, you don't have a cap because you're not fitting into somebody else's kind of criteria. So this is the thing about learning a skill that's not taught in universities and learning online. We have to understand that we are not being pushed into somebody else's mold, okay? So you have to at first really identify what makes sense for you study-wise in order to start making money, because you keep losing money even though you're studying. It's telling you something. It's telling you, okay, slow down, pull back, and get back to the studying so you understand the material more. Now, when you are studying, there are 2 different ways you can do it. There's targeted and there's heuristic. And I want to talk about that a little bit because I think this is where a lot of people struggle. And they don't quite understand, or they've never been taught about the difference between targeted studying and heuristic studying. I'll give a definition as to how I like to explain them. First, we'll start there. Targeted studying is when you pick one specific area and you hyper focus on it. So you would say, I want to learn about hold levels, and you would do targeted studying. So that's all you're learning about. It's very targeted. It's one piece at a time. Heuristic is taking a lot of topics and learning them all at the same time. So heuristic would be a very broad type of studying, and that's how a university is set up to teach you. They teach based on a heuristic module or model. They teach you 4 or 5 different things at once. If you ever gone to university and you've been in classes, you'll be in an arts class, you'll be in an engineering class, you'll be in a science class, you'll be in a variety of different things. And this is heuristic studying. So identifying targeted versus heuristic is kind of one of the first keystones in understanding, okay, I'm still not making money and I'm losing money even though I'm studying and I can't get anywhere. I'm stuck in this kind of death loop of studying and thinking I'm better and losing money. So understanding that first off, you need to scale how much you're actually taking. Because again, we're not fitting our module into a box. We're not fitting our study time into one set box where you're forced to take 4 classes. You could take 8 if you want. That's a beautiful thing about learning online is you could take 8 classes if you wanted to. And if you at the same time couldn't handle 4 classes, you could take 2 and it would take you longer. So find out where your perfect threshold lies so that you can understand, okay, how much should I be studying? What can I actually take? Next, you need to start focusing either heuristically or targeted on information. I'm going to give a few different examples here. of where each one of those would make sense. Say you're struggling with a concept, very specifically, you cannot mark levels. For some reason, you're doing an amazing job with trends. You understand risk management. You've got all these other components. You can really dissect the spots where it makes sense to put a stop loss, and the spots where it makes sense to do something like deep diving, and you're great with hard closes. You understand all the other concepts of my science. That's great. You understand it at a very deep level, but you're having a big problem with hold levels. You just can't seem to get hold levels for some reason. This becomes your Achilles heel. This is where you need to go into a targeted training module. You need to flip what you're doing and you need to do targeted training. And you need to understand that targeted training is best for most people. Now, I don't want to say everybody because everybody's going to be different. Each person has a different cue here. We'll talk about that in a second. For most people, it's in the morning when they have had no distractions. And if you've seen my work on System 1 and System 2 and emotional versus logic, or my video on vitality from Mental Analysis Evolved, you'll understand this very well. You need to focus when you're doing targeted learning. You need to focus at a time when your mind is at its most optimal state. So you're hyper-focusing on one subject and you're doing it while your mind's ability to retain information is at its highest. So this makes total sense. Targeted works very well with high logic. So when you're talking about no emotions and using System 1 and System 2 and that most optimized time of the day, that pairs perfectly with targeted information. So if you're having trouble with hold levels, you have to start kind of massaging and working the way you study a little differently. You need to say, okay, I'm having trouble with hold levels. I need to stop learning heuristically for a little while, and I need to do targeted learning on hold levels. Go through a bunch of material on hold levels while my mind is at its most optimized state. That will accelerate your learning curve through the roof. Now, alternatively, if you're finding that you're not really struggling in any one area, you're just kind of not really getting it, then you need to be more on a heuristic module where you're looking at heuristic information at a broad. So you need to say, okay, I need to study levels, trends, hard closes, stop losses. You need to study all these different components because there's not one general thing, there's not one very specific thing that you're struggling with. Rather, you're just kind of not really putting the pieces together. Then you need to go into heuristic learning, and then you need to go and you need to take a wide variety of different lessons throughout the day. Now, the thing with heuristic learning is you can kind of do it at any point in the day, because what I find with heuristic learning is if we used our most optimized time with heuristic learning, what happens is we retain and we start to overweigh the first 2 or 3 concepts. Say, I'm going to name 4 concepts here. Let's go trends, levels, hard closes, and stop loss. If you decide to do trends and levels first, and then hard closes and stop losses after that, you'll really start to drive home the material of trends and levels. And then hard closes and stop losses, it'll be like there's pieces missing and your mind is kind of too exhausted to really learn it. So you'll kind of get this skewed result where you're going to create weak points and weak spots for your mind, which is what we want to avoid. So when you're doing heuristic learning, it's a little different than our targeted learning, and it operates in kind of the opposite. So with targeted learning, what your day should look like is this. You should get up early in the morning when your mind is at its most optimal state, pick one topic to focus on, learn it for a couple hours, take a break, and then heuristically, you should use that heuristic time to go and mark levels on your charts, because then you're using the heuristic part of your mind where you're marking levels and trends and stop losses, and you're analyzing entries and exits and sells and longs and shorts. So then you're using a heuristic module to do your practice. So your practice should exist heuristically and your learning should exist targeted. Take the other scenario where you need to flip it over and you have to learn heuristically, but then your practice should be targeted. So instead, you wake up in the morning and you do targeted practice. So you practice the things that you learned heuristically the day before. So they're kind of opposite of each other, as to where if you're training targeted information, you're doing it in the morning. If you're training heuristic information, you're not doing it in the morning. You're actually taking that targeted time when your mind is at its highest state, and you're trying to implement what you've learned from the day prior heuristically. So maybe in the afternoon, you put a whole entire load on your plate. So you're learning 4 and 5 different subjects, And then when you wake up, you do targeted training and you're in the charts and you're actually putting that stuff in practice and in play. So you're marking levels, you're marking trends, you're doing all the things that would complete the person who would say, hey, I'm just having trouble with kind of everything here. I don't really know the perfect blend, or I'm not really comfortable with a lot of things. So I just need to kind of heuristically train. Great. Do your heuristic training in the afternoon. And then in the morning times, do your heuristic learning during the daytime, and then do training targeted in the morning the day following. So it's really interesting because they kind of work in opposition to each other, where targeted learning and heuristic learning, it's more about identifying where your weak spots are. And if you can do that, you can start to tackle that thing that we talked about at the beginning of this video, which is I'm still losing money even though I'm studying. Well, there's a right and a wrong way to study. So this is really where targeted versus heuristic should take over. And if you haven't seen my video on mental analysis evolved, the one labeled vitality, it's all about how the mind works in its most optimized form. So system 1 and system 2, that's the video you'd want to look at if you want to know more about optimizing your mind and the best time of day to study and the reasons why, and how each person kind of varies there with what they're expecting from their mind. So with that said, what are your growing pains in day trading? Of course, leave a comment. That's how you're going to tell me what your growing pains are. But with this series, I like to dissect what people's growing pains are. And this is what a big one is. So growing pains is all about saying, hey, I have these points where I have roadblocks or I'm struggling. And every day trader goes through it. So there's no shame in it. And you tell me what your growing pains are in the comments, because I'll pick them and I'll say, hey, this one is kind of a common thing that people keep bringing up. Let's tackle that and make a video out of growing pains. So again, comment, like, subscribe to the channel, and see you on the next one.